Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet to take a look back at Ross County 1, Hibs 1. A bit of a sucker punch for David Gray and his side up in the Highlands on Saturday. Dylan Levitt putting Hibs ahead in the first half. Jordan Smith saving a penalty from Jordan White before Smith gave away a penalty in the closing minutes, and that was put away by Ronan Hale to make sure that Hibs headed back down the road with just a 1 point instead of 3. Craig, as always, thank you very much for joining us. How are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad. It was a bit of a slog, that game at the weekend, and a wee bit disappointing not to go away with the 3 points, but that keeps an unbeaten run going, so can't be too disappointed.
It's one of those ones I think for Hibs it will sting at the time, but then I think maybe once it's that kind of disappointing wears off, I think going up to Ross County and getting a point is never really a bad result. It's because they are pretty strong at home. I think in the context, you think Hibs and how the game panned out. If you take away those penalties, which we'll come to, it was a disappointing one. But I think David Gray himself has said a point on the road is never a disaster, especially the circumstances around it. Not a great surface. I don't know how it looked to anybody who was maybe watching on TV, but if anybody who was there or been able to see, it was not conducive, I think Gray said, to fast, free-flowing football, and that certainly played out on the pitch. Before we get into today's show, just a word as always for our sponsor. Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash and even Oasis tickets. So get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com. So let's get stuck into it. I mean, we'll start as always, take a wee look at the Hibs lineup. Again, I mean, I think looking at it, we found out before the game that Nicky Cadden was available and it was likely he would come back in. So again, there's a lot of positions on the pitch at the moment where I think they sort of almost pick themselves. You look at Martin Boyle, he's in great form. The back three has been pretty settled for the past few weeks. I know Lewis Miller's dipped in and out. Him and Chris Cadden have exchanged appearances on the right-hand side. So I suppose it was maybe a question of who was going to play alongside next to Triantis, and it was Dylan Levitt who came back in. Josh Campbell playing just ahead of them. Dwight Gale getting the nod up top. Alongside Boyle, obviously Kujarevich and Kieran Bowie on the bench still working their way back to full fitness. So it was, no great surprises in the lineup, I didn't think.
No, I think I said it was good to keep that consistency. I think with the team and Levitt's been in for a couple of games now. Away at County, you probably want a Josh Campbell. It's like a good game for him in terms of just a bit of graft and an away game and things like that. So he makes sense and he's been in a good bit of form in there. And it was obviously great to see Nicky Cadden back playing with the masks, which, it's good to get. I think it's good to get a game under your belt because it must be really uncomfortable and a bit daunting when you first play in it. So I think it was good that he got through that unscathed, and I would imagine he'll get back to his best form when he's settled a bit more in that. But I think it's good just to get consistency in that team. For a long time every week it was changing because of suspensions and injuries and other things in form. So it's good to see that we've kept consistency, and for the first time in a long time we actually had like quite a decent bench with sort of realistic options that we could change and add to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd feel awful self-conscious if I had to go play football with one of those masks on, to be honest with you. So I think this is where there'll be a bit of kind of maybe lays bare what the frustration will be here for Hibs, because I mean, I think, again, I keep harking back to this, but I thought he kind of made a really sort of fair assessment at everything from the game on Saturday. David Gray, he was talking about how much control Hibs had within it without really kind of kicking on and playing anywhere quite. I mean, I don't, maybe not to say nowhere near their best, but certainly you feel that they do and have shown that there are other levels to go up. But I think again there was circumstances around it, the conditions, the pitch. It was one of those games where if you were going to win, I think you had to grind it out really, and they came awfully close to doing that. You can see here Hibs finishing on 0.75 expected goals, Ross County 1.67. But obviously you can see those two big spikes there are the two penalties. But so if you were to take them away, I think in total, as I said, they're 1.67. If you were to take them away, I think counties. I think those two. Let me see. Yeah, the two penalties accounted for 1.56 expected goals of the 1.67. So it shows you how little they threatened Hibs from open play, which that's kind of got to be a bit of a frustration, that, because it really did feel like, even though when you're only 1-0 up, you're never totally in control of a game, but Hibs didn't really feel. I didn't feel like they were in any great jeopardy in terms of how the flow of the game was going. You were thinking if Ross County were going to get back into it, it was going to be, maybe somebody sticking one in the top corner from 25 yards, or a mistake or another penalty. And I think when you look at that there, you can see where the frustration will be, because they limited Ross County to almost nothing from open play.
Yeah, I mean, I think aside from the penalties, it was Nicky Cadden's arm that was the next best thing that nearly threatened us for a goal. So yeah, I think that was really disappointing. And obviously, the XG jumps up for the penalties. And I think Gray alluded to this maybe in his press conference, or it was maybe on Hibs TV after that. I did feel like we were in control. I did think that, but I still, and I think we were playing in the second half to just try and hit on the counter attack, which makes a lot of sense. But I didn't think we created a huge amount, and we sat back, and I thought we let Ross County just not maybe gain control of the game, but just get enough confidence that we could maybe sneak something here. That little part from just in the second half, I thought, apart from a Boyle chance on the counter attack where he sort of forced a decent save from the keeper, I thought we weren't particularly great going forward in the second half, and I think that's maybe part of the frustration. I do think that it's okay to win a game 1-0. It's okay to sit back and look to hit on the counter, but I think they were there for the taking a little bit, and I felt we just maybe sat off just a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think the kind of frustration will be not going to kind of kill off the game. And I think, as you're saying, there was options on the bench this time in attacking areas to try and go and do that. But it was just it was a real slog of a 90 minutes to sit through. I think when you make that journey, you're hoping for a wee bit of drama, entertainment. I know there was drama in terms of the penalties, but if you're one of the 1,000 odd Hibs fans who travelled up, that's not the kind of drama or excitement that you would have been hoping for. We'll just take a look at Hibs' passing network, Felix. So this kind of gives you an idea of how they shaped up through the game, where they tried to direct the ball. You can see there Chris Cadden getting high on the right, Nicky Cadden on the left. Levitt, I thought, kind of during the game, seemed to be the more sort of conservative. I know he scored, Dylan Levitt, but generally a wee bit more conservative in his positioning. Triantis maybe getting about the park a wee bit more. I mean, I think you can see here plenty of passes from, because obviously the kind of thickness of those lines, folks, sort of indicates how many passes were exchanged between two players, and you can see that between Iredale and Nicky Cadden. But I thought, obviously, Cadden's been such a good outlet for Hibs in so many occasions lately, but I kind of felt that they maybe didn't get him into the sort of really good positions where he could hurt teams. I felt like he was maybe a wee bit subdued in that sense.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting to see that Rocky, Levitt, and Iredale have, aside from Chris Cadden, have sort of got the more on-ball value, and I think that probably speaks to how Ross County set up a little bit, in terms of who they were willing to kind of have on the ball and what they were willing to do. But yeah, it's really interesting because we always talk on the show when we look at these that normally it's almost exclusively down the left-hand side, with the right-hand side being somewhere that we tend not to attack. So it's quite interesting to see it almost flipped completely on that. I don't know. Yeah, I did think we did struggle to get Nicky Cadden into the game. When we did, we actually created a couple of good opportunities, good crosses into the box, leading to corners and things like that. But yeah, it was just few and far between. We just couldn't seem to get him involved, and I don't know if part of that as well, we were obviously touching on him playing with a mask and things like that, and how he was potentially feeling. So it's kind of understandable. It's interesting just to see how close Gale is in that there with Boyle and Campbell. You'd obviously probably want him just to be a bit higher up the pitch within that, but yeah, it kind of makes sense looking at that from how the game sort of panned out on the pitch.
Yeah, and we'll just make have a wee sort of more of a visual look at how Hibs tried to set up, how they tried to get through that lost count. I mean, there was a lot of this. I remember kind of Rocky getting the ball from Jordan Smith and Ross County just kind of sitting off, and then Hibs trying to go from there.
Yeah, it's something that we've seen happen quite a lot, where because obviously it's Ross County set up in basically the same shape as Hibs, really a wee bit different with their forward players, but pretty much the same shape. And yeah, every time it came to a goal kick or playing out from the back, White and Robertson would just sort of drop out onto O'Hora and Iredale. They'd leave Rocky on the ball, and then in midfield, Chilvers was pushing on into Levitt, and then Randall and Josh Nisbet were then moving on to Triantis and Campbell and keeping it there. Then their wing backs were picking up our wing backs, and then their centre halves were picking up Gale and Boyle and leaving a centre half spare. So it was always going to be tricky at the beginning, and you could see this pattern played out quite a lot, where Rocky was coming forward with the ball and there wasn't always too many options for him. And it's a wee bit frustrating, because I do actually think he's capable of hitting a long ball with some accuracy, and I don't know if just the tightness of the pitch, it just didn't seem like we were really keen to do that. And as we're saying, it's quite difficult to see when you're watching it on TV what the space is like, how high the Ross County line is. But yeah, if you go through this clip, you can see he does the right thing by driving forward, and I've just highlighted again, you can just see how tight the County players are in these positions, but you can actually see how deep Nicky Cadden is on the far side there, but he's getting pressured by James Brown. But when Rocky gets into that area, that space, he turns, instead of potentially trying to find that forward pass or that outlet, he turns and he goes back, which, listen, it's not a bad decision, because we're pretty tight up. It's, man for man, it's quite tight up there. He turns, he actually goes back to Iredale, and at the time, and when I watched it back, if Iredale rolls it out his feet and hits a switch, because you can see you've got Robertson, White, you've got Chilvers all over that side of the pitch. If he hits it straight out to O'Hora, then we've got a little bit of an overload on this right-hand side. He can step forward, Chrissy Cadden can go forward, and we might be able to attack. But we end up going back to Smith, and then by the time the ball works its way back out, if you go into the next clip, the pressure's back on again. O'Hora's being pressured. Chris Cadden's dropped in to get it, but there's somebody just out of frame sort of pressuring him, and we end up going long there, and Ross County just kind of win that first ball and then pick up the second. So there was quite a lot of that where we just, and it probably was the condition of the pitch as well, in terms of not feeling confident firing the ball into somebody's feet with it bobbling around. But it was just I just sort of felt like we never really pinned their wing backs high. They sort of pinned both Chris Cadden and Nicky Cadden in a little bit, and because it was busy in the middle of the park, it was quite difficult to find feet. And it just seemed like it was just like fire and ice. We were both just cancelling each other out, really.
Yeah, so it didn't make for a great spectacle up until the Hibs goal, really, did it?
No, and actually it's interesting because obviously we'll get to the penalty, but I will show a clip later on of us actually playing out really, really well, which actually leads to the corner, which leads to the goal. So I'm not actually sure if this saved penalty, which we're just about to discuss, actually
I will go back if you want to get a look into this first, to be honest, because you were saying before we came on, this is one of the sort of better examples of how Hibs actually got to grips with us on that one occasion. Yeah,
so in the setup there, so you can see it a wee bit better for White on O'Hora there, Rocky carrying the ball. And what Triantis does this time is he just comes and drops in beside Rocky, almost to make like a back four. So if you go into that next clip, they play like a couple of little 1-2s. Now in that moment, Chilvers isn't going to follow him into the back four. He's going to stay in this position. So they do sort of keep that 3, but you can see now that Iredale can now push it a little bit wider, so force Robertson to kind of go further across that side. White's obviously tucking in as well. But if you go into the next clip there, you can see now it's with Rocky on this side, and you can actually see Triantis now kind of encouraging O'Hora to kind of come back in and be a bit of an option as he goes to move on. And then if you go into the next clip, we actually have a really good little bit of movement. You can see because Iredale's far wide, there's a little gap opened up between Robertson, Chilvers, and what happens? Boyle comes in, and then he spins out and looks to run in behind, and Nicky Cadden actually drops into the sort of central part of the pitch. Rocky finds him. If you go into the next part, he goes back into Iredale, and then spins away. Iredale plays a pretty deep, probably one of the best passes in the game, to be honest with you. And you can see, it's quite hard to see with the referee there, but Levitt's just made a little movement off the back of Josh Nisbet and drops into that little space, which Iredale finds him. And actually, it's really difficult to clip on that side, but Boyle is actually, if you go back one, Boyle's out on that side as well, just sort of beside where it says Luke. Boyle's, ironically enough, over there. So we spoke last week about him picking up these different positions in the game. So he's dropped over into that side, so almost you can see Gale's over there as well, and it's actually Boyle who gets on the ball, drags the right centre back out. Nicky Cadden spins off James Brown and overlaps Martin Boyle, who slips him in. And then if you go to that final clip, Nicky Cadden gets a decent ball into the box. Chris Cadden kind of connects with it, falls to Gale, and I think it's Randall that ends up clearing it for the corner, which eventually leads to the goal. So, yeah. So it was a really, really decent bit of play on a really difficult pitch, but it just, I suppose, maybe the frustration for David Gray is there wasn't that amount of rotation and, I suppose, creativity when playing out that you would have hoped for, because, you know, if Ross County are set up like that, you do have to try and do some different things, you know, especially if you've not got a Bowie on and or a Kurevich and you can't go long and you are going to commit to playing through the lines and stuff, then you have to have, like what Triantis did there, you have to drop in, maybe make it a back four, push O'Hora on, push Iredale on, try and create some different spaces and just make it a bit difficult for Ross County, or at least get them asking a couple of questions and having to communicate with each other. I just sort of felt in the first half it was quite easy for them to just drop into that shape, and we never really quite had the answers to sort of deal with that.
Yeah, what we'll do is we can move this on a wee bit, and let me see, we'll skip the penalty for now, because then we can talk about the two penalties side by side. Because obviously we've just talked about Hibs got the corner that led to the goal there. We'll go straight to the goal itself. Comes from a set piece. Decent delivery from Nicky Cadden again, and it's just highlighting Josh Campbell, that aerial ability, you know, just such an important thing, and probably why he's getting the nod in the team, you know, at the moment, ahead of Hoylett and maybe Molotnikov as well in that role, just because that's an extra thing he can bring just to keep the ball alive. And, you know, after that, it's a little bit of the Triantis show, isn't it? With that first touch, just, you know, cushions it out the air. Just such a lovely touch there. And it's interesting because Levitt moves across as Campbell wins the first header, but as soon as Triantis controls it, you can see Levitt straight away there. He sort of changes his movement and starts to go into that area. And Chilvers, like any attacking player, is just sleeping a little bit, really, and it's all too late. And it's a great second touch from Triantis, and just gets himself, you know, gets his body in between, protects the ball on that side. And you can see Chilvers just sort of racing into that point to try and get in. It's just a lovely, like, outside of the right boot, cushioned layoff into Levitt's path, and just a really fantastic strike from Levitt as well. Really controlled finish. But Triantis, just absolute class in that moment. Aye, because it's the combination of the first touch and then the second, and he's got that big frame where he can just hold the man off and slide that into Levitt. And as you say, it's a lovely finish. He doesn't, as they say, try to take the leather off it, but he just guides it into that corner. And he's so good at that, Dylan Levitt. I think you very rarely, if he gets a sight of goal, you always fancy him. And I do feel like he hits the target more often than not. But I just, before we move on from this, I really like that movement, the going back inside into that area there, because if he just, you know, if Giannis is going to get his back to goal there, he's sort of maybe body sort of, if he was turning onto his right foot, there is, you know, you can see an area there that Josh Campbell would maybe try and get into. But I think if Levitt tries to maybe make that run around the back of Campbell, if he does get the ball, it's a tighter angle. There's going to be guys getting across. So I think it's good. It's kind of good presence of mind there, isn't it? And sensing where you can cause trouble by changing that direction and then just going into that wee area at the edge of the box where you're always liable to get a shot off if the ball comes your way.
And also, I think as well that Triantis doesn't ever look up, I don't think. So I think it must be Levitt shouting to get it. So it's obviously something that as soon as he's got the ball, he's obviously targeting that area. And I'm sure in the goals he has scored for Hibs and even at Dundee United, that bit at the edge of the box seems to be a place that he's comfortable in and around there, getting shots away. And it was one of those ones. It almost seemed like as soon as he recognised the space and the ball was laid off, that it was only going to end up in the back of the net.
Yeah, he's lighting up type stuff as soon as that gets laid off to him. So I mean, we'll take it to the Hibs penalty, unless there was something else you wanted to. No, not the Hibs the Ross County penalty. Chance would be a fine thing. So I mean, because it kind of came from nowhere, really, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I've highlighted this, because I didn't really see this highlighted on Sports Scene or anything like that, but I actually thought it was a foul on Campbell because Randall, like, he's nowhere near the ball there, and he obviously catches him with his knee in the sort of lower bit of his back. So I actually thought when all the VAR stuff, like, I thought it was going to eventually get pulled back to see, actually there was a foul there, because he's nowhere near the ball.
And I do remember him being down for a wee bit.
He was.
Campbell holding his back, aye.
He was down for a fair wee while, holding his back. So that was like quite frustrating, I thought, and nobody really seemed to pick that up. But I having watched it back a few times, like, maybe it would be quite a soft foul, but he's nowhere near the ball. So I don't, and the referee, as you can see there, is, standing right in front of it. So I just thought, when you even just went, I know freeze frames don't always do it justice, but if you look at it back, like, he's nowhere near the ball and he's clearly caught him. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I thought it was potentially a foul, but after that, I think as the ball gets worked wide, I think David Gray will be a bit disappointed, because Chilvers, who I thought was quite neat and tidy, he's allowed to come inside and cross, which I'm sure David Gray doesn't seem to like any crosses being delivered into the box whatsoever. So I think that would have frustrated him, because I'm not sure if it's Triantis recovering, but he sort of goes a bit too quick, and Chilvers just kind of cuts in and obviously puts in that ball. And I mean, I'm sure we can go into the rules and stuff like that, but I mean, I don't really understand how it's a penalty. I think Brown obviously comes across, like, Nicky Cadden, he is out of position. I think David Gray mentioned that, like, he's wrong side and he's sort of scrambling into the box. But, as Brown misses the ball, it just bounces up, and, Cadden's, there's nothing he can really do with his arm in that position. And bizarrely, it almost scores an own goal. I think it's like a wee combination of Smith and the post that just sort of keep it out. So I think if somebody's behind them, totally, I think it's a penalty. And I think also even if he's in front of Brown there, for example, and it comes off his arm, I can sort of understand it being a penalty. But the fact that it happens so fast, it goes through Brown's legs from a missed shot and just bobbles up and hits him in that short space of time, I just don't think that's an unnatural position for your arms to be in.
Yeah, I think if there's another Ross County player coming in behind him, you could then make the argument, well, maybe he's potentially stopped somebody playing the ball there, but he hasn't. And this is what kind of gets me with the whole discussion a lot of the time around unnatural positions. It's as if, at no point ever in any movement should your arm be raised in any way. It's like I mean, fair enough, if you're standing still, your arm shouldn't be up like that. But I think to make certain movements, and he's trying to let the ball, the ball's bounced up, he's trying to let it go across him.
Yeah.
You're always going to be using your arms. And I think it's an area that I think just gets, really, really muddled in terms of what is natural, what's unnatural. And I think we get, in general, we talk about these things. I think there's a lot of tying ourselves in knots in terms of, like, as I say there, what is unnatural and what's natural. I think in this instance, I think he's pretty hard done by, Nicky Cadden. And it's, as you say, it's very hard from when the ball's coming at you at that speed. It's hard to get out of the way of it. But I suppose the solution would be to not be out of position in the first place. And fair play to David Gray, he didn't excuse that. And I think he also, obviously we'll get to the second penalty, he was talking about how there was some poor decisions made in the lead up to that as well. So, but I mean, it's that's just, as you can see there, almost going in.
Right, and just highlight that because as David Gray said, nobody claims for it because it's it just happens so fast, and there's been other examples across the season, and like even I think Declan Gallagher had one at the weekend as well, where it's and you can go down a rabbit hole a little bit with it when you start looking at all these decisions isolated. But in that one there, it's the question for me should be, okay, he's behind the man. The player's intended to shoot. He's missed it. It's bobbled up so fast. He's running back into position. It's not like he's standing still with his arms outstretched. He's running back. He's tried to move it. He's not moving his arm towards the ball in any way. So, I just don't understand that one at all.
Yeah, sorry, I'm inclined to agree. And then it got when it looked like Hibs were going to escape from Dingwall with a single goal victory, which I think they would have been good value for, to be honest. We talked earlier on about how little Ross County troubled Hibs from open play. I know Hibs didn't create an awful lot themselves, but kind of very in control of the game. But I think this is the risk that you always run going into the latter stages of a game with just a 1-goal lead. At some point, obviously, the other team are going to start throwing caution to the wind. So this is just the lead up to the second penalty being awarded. So how did you see this?
Yeah, see, before that, I think one thing as well is that, Ross County made a couple of subs. McLeod and Phillips came on, and then obviously they put Ronan Hale on for Ashworth. So it looked like they'd sort of really threw caution to the wind to really push for it. And, we spoke about Hibs options off the bench, but, actually a beater for Nicky Cadden made a lot of sense with Nicky Cadden's injury and just coming back into things. And then obviously losing Levitt was a bit of a blow, I think, as well, because just to have that bit extra control in the middle of the park. And Mariah Welsh, when he came on against Rangers, he brought a lot of energy, and he is able to get forward and maybe apply a bit more pressure onto the ball, which he was able to do. So I could kind of understand that substitution. But it's funny because after that, and then obviously Gale for Bowie, but after that, really, you were sort of like, yeah, you probably wouldn't have made any other subs. Like I thought about Campbell because I thought he was really tiring. I don't know if it looked like that because I know you were actually at the game, but it just looked like he was having heavy legs and kind of struggling to get about. But again, if you take him off, you lose him from corners and set pieces. So it just made me think about the squad again, really, to go, things are better, but actually we've not quite got all the pieces just yet. But yeah, it comes from that. It comes from a corner, it's headed clear, and it's actually Obita who picks up the ball from that. And I just highlighted Boyle and Triantis because Boyle's obviously off. This is what they'll be waiting for, that transition to go and try and hit on the counter-attack. And then Triantis is just in the middle there. And if you go into the next clip, it's a decent ball from Obita up the line. And Triantis is in this position here, and we're obviously getting, you can see Ross County recovering, and he actually just takes a really quite a heavy touch, Triantis, on that side, which allows him to be dispossessed. And it's tricky because I think other players in that position would maybe try and buy a foul, or would maybe just thump it straight up the line. But we know Triantis isn't like that. He wants to get on the ball and he wants to play. And that's something, he's still a young player, and I'm sure next time he's in a position like that, he'll maybe try and do something differently. But he gets the ball pinched, which is probably the first mistake. But then after that, there is a few other ones. So in that next clip, like once County get the ball forward, you can see on that side of the pitch, like we've got Campbell out there, Obita's still out there, Chris Cadden's out there, O'Hora's out there, Mariah Welsh is out there. So we've actually got like 5 players in that position out there with one player on the ball and only one other. I know there's a couple of players making a run there, but I think again, not to sound like David Gray, you cannot let that ball come in, really, especially with those players out there. And the fact that O'Hora is out as well. I don't know if just because Obita's out there, if Chris Cadden sort of, just sort of relaxes a little bit. I did think maybe he could have dropped a little bit deeper and double teamed up on the player on the ball. But I think with that amount of players on that side, we shouldn't be letting a cross come in. And then just in the middle, you can just see Rocky kind of passing. It looks like they're just passing the man on to Iredale in that situation there, which is probably the right thing to do, but they just need to get tight to that striker in that moment. And because we don't stop the cross and because we're not tight to the man, it obviously leads to Smith coming out. And I don't know if I think I've maybe clipped him coming out. I don't know if it's in the next clip or not. But you can see there. I mean, it's a decent enough ball across the box, and it goes into a really dangerous area, right in front of the 6-yard box. But I think if you're in closer to the player there, if Iredale's in and Rocky can get in front, Rocky maybe clears that But it's all, and you can actually see it's Kieran Bowie's actually at the back post doing a bit of defending as well. It's that thing where, we're about to catch Ross County in the transition, they then catch us as well. And when you're all out of shape, it can sometimes just split-second decisions really. And as the ball comes in, like having looked at it, I think I seen Gray's interview saying the referee said he thought it was reckless. Like that was why he gave it like a reckless challenge. But I think Smith doesn't think the striker's going to get to the ball, so he comes out to almost like smother the ball. And listen, it's clever, it's a little outside the right foot flick and then just let the legs clatter in. But I do, when you freeze it there, Smith's foot is kind of unusually a wee bit high.
Yeah.
So I think I started to think about, well, if that's a defender flying in like this, it's probably going to be a penalty. So it probably has to be a penalty. So it's clumsy from him. But I can see
if that happens at the other end and you don't get it, are you?
Yeah, you're upset. You're upset. It's just clumsy. Yeah.
Aye. That's the lens that I always try and think about these things from. If it happened at the other end, how would you feel about it? And it's frustration, isn't it? I think we've got another angle of it here where he's like,
and listen, the county player as well, he's sort of just like, we've all done it playing fives and that, you just sort of let your leg fall into it and take the contact. But he has been guilty, Smith, a few times of coming out quite like with his feet and sort of like a bit unorthodox stuff. And I think that one there, he's obviously anticipating to try and smother the ball, which is a good thing. You want a keeper to come out and do that, and he is actually normally pretty good at doing that. I think it's just that, as I said, we've been caught on the transition, a ball's ended up in the box, and it's that split second off him darting across the line. Because I actually think if he stays exactly where he is, it's probably going to be a heavy touch from the county striker, or you know what I mean. Or it would be a very difficult outside of the right boot finish at that point. And we've got Iredale and Rocky across, so I actually think probably nothing comes to the chance. But his movement to come out kind of makes the county players' mind up there of, I just need to get a touch on this and take the contact.
Because you say that there's nothing really else, nowhere else really for the guy. It was Keenan Phillips, I think it was, who went down. It's not really anywhere else for him to go unless he does get brought down. So that's I think those angles in that position of the leg make that one not doesn't look so good in those instances. So it's obviously everybody knows what happens next. Ronan Hill puts the penalty straight down the middle almost, in County get away with a point. So, I mean, having gone through all that, a bit of time to sort of reflect on it, what's your kind of overall verdict on the performance and the result?
I think it's just an opportunity missed. I think the fact that, we got a bit of a reprieve from that first penalty with the save, it kind of galvanised us a little bit. We started to play through their press. We got the goal just before half-time from a decent bit of build-up play. I suppose the only wee frustration is we could have came out in the second half and, maybe tried to kill the game off. But I think that we always talk about the evolution of the team and the next things they need to manage. And I think that's probably their next thing, is to be able to go out and do that. It's not for the want of trying. And, I think Ross County deserve a little bit of credit for hanging in there. And I think Don Cowie made good subs at good times as well. And quite brave subs, I suppose, as well, taking guys like White off and stuff like that for the physical side of things. So, when it got to that part of the game, you were kind of just hoping that we would see things out and get, and if those wee split decisions don't happen, you could be talking about a really professional 1-0 victory away from home after, you know what I mean? So, I don't think it's anything to get too panicky about, and it keeps the unbeaten run going, which is great. Sets us up for this home game against Aberdeen at the weekend, which will be another big game. And obviously, getting more minutes into Bowie again as well is obviously a plus. But maybe still shows that the squad needs a wee bit of work still as well if we're going to keep pushing for the top six, because that gap between 3rd and 11th is just crazy tight, isn't it? And everyone seems to be beating everybody and taking points off each other.
Aye, it's an absolutely ridiculous league, to be honest, isn't it?
Yes.
Aye, and the big games keep on coming, as you say. Aberdeen coming to Easter Road this weekend. Obviously, the last time they came to Easter Road was the big turning point in the season. Aberdeen's season has just completely fell off a cliff since then, beaten again at the weekend. So it's a great opportunity for Hibs to further close that gap on them. They could have got to within potentially 3 points of them if they'd hung on at the weekend there, which is, so what's the gap at now? Yeah, it's at 5, sort of 4. I think even with the gap at 5 at this point, I think, because there was a wee stat I dug out at the weekend when Aberdeen came to Easter Road the last time before kick-off, they were 26 points ahead of Hibs. So it shows you just the direction the two teams' seasons have gone in. Hopefully, from a Hibs perspective, the repeat of that fixture doesn't do another 180 for both teams' seasons. But yeah, we'll build into the Aberdeen game through the week. But for now, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you, as always, for joining us, folks, and thank to Craig, as always, for the insight into the weekend's game. A disappointing result for Hibs, but as Craig said, not one to get too worried about with all the context and circumstances around it. But Hibs will obviously be looking to get 3 points back on the board this coming weekend. So thank you, as always, for joining us, folks. If you're watching us on YouTube, do consider hitting that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any of these shows. And obviously, it lets us continue to grow the channel, which means we can bring you more content. Thank you, as always, and we'll speak to you again very, very soon. Cheers.